What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. In a world where nuclear weapons have long been seen as the ultimate deterrent and a blackmail device, recent events have challenged this assumption in a dramatic and unforeseen way. Russia, the nation with the largest nuclear arsenal on the planet, finds itself in a delicate situation. Despite possessing the power to literally annihilate the entire cities with the push of a button, Russia has been unable to deter even a Ukrainian invasion. This unprecedented event raises several questions. Why has Russia's nuclear arsenal failed its only job to protect its borders? What does this tell us about nuclear deterrence in the modern world? And are there any conditions under which Putin will press the button? This will be a very interesting video, guys. I made several discoveries myself whenever preparing for it. So let's begin answering these questions one by one. At the beginning of this conflict, many would have assumed that Russia's vast nuclear stockpile would have served as a shield, deterring any nation, particularly Ukraine, from challenging its borders. After all, Russia's nuclear arsenal stands at approximately 5,600 warheads, outpacing even the United States, who have a little bit more than 5,000. Of these Russian nukes, about 1,700 of them are reportedly ready for deployment at any given moment. Most are in the storage and fully operational, and the rest are decommissioned, and they require some sort of work to be armed once again. This formidable arsenal is supposed to be at the full strategic triad of nuclear delivery systems: air, ground, and water, which includes bombers, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and obviously the submarines. The underwater ones are particularly dangerous because submarines can emerge anywhere in the world at any time almost undetected, quickly launch a missile, leaving very little time for the targeted country to react. But there are very few nuclear-carrying submarines, so at least there is some sort of balance. Yet, despite this immense firepower, Ukraine has pressed forward with an invasion, seemingly unbothered by the possibility of nuclear devastation. This disconnect between perceived power and actual deterrence highlights an important distinction. Nuclear weapons, while terrifying, are not invincible shields. Rather, they are tools of last resort, reserved for only the gravest threats to a nation's existence. Ukraine's decision to cross into Russian territory shows a level of confidence in the limitations of Russia's willingness to use these weapons. A gamble which Zelensky administration decided to take after carefully examining the facts, which we guys will talk about as well in today's video. A gamble which seemed scary at first, but after taking everything into consideration, it turned out to be what it seems the easiest decision possible. A gamble that fully paid off. Indeed, as Ukraine continues to push into Russian territory, the world is witnessing a situation where nuclear deterrence is more of a psychological concept than an absolute barrier. The reality is that nuclear weapons alone cannot solve all strategic challenges, and this war has brought that truth and insight into the real power of nuclear weapons and blackmail of using them. A significant factor behind Ukraine's boldness lies in the global norms that have developed around nuclear weapons. Since their first and only wartime use in 1945, nuclear weapons have become increasingly stigmatized on the world stage. The Non-Proliferation Treaty (NPT), which has been signed by nearly every country, including Russia, forbids the development of new nukes, while allowing current nuclear states to retain theirs. Various international treaties have further restricted nuclear testing and the deployment of such weapons, adding layers of diplomatic and legal pressure against their use. However, despite these norms, countries that possess nuclear weapons, such as Russia, have not abandoned them. Instead, these nations justify their arsenals as necessary for maintaining global balance, while criticizing the nuclear ambitions of others. And yes, you heard it right. Just like little kids, the head of states cry about other kids' toys while having exactly the same toys. Yet even the most powerful nuclear states, such as Russia and the United States, remain constrained by the international community's morale and political opposition to use of these weapons. Ukraine's actions reflect a deeper understanding of these constraints. They know that the use of nuclear weapons would trigger catastrophic political fallout for Russia, especially for Putin, particularly with key economic partners such as China and India. These nations, while supportive of Russia in other ways, would likely abandon Moscow if it resorted to nuclear aggression. As such, an escalation could destabilize global markets and threaten their own national security. China and India might continue buying Russian energy sources and other commodities, which, by the way, continues to fuel Russian war machine. But I'm almost certain their leadership hinted Putin countless times to stop even thinking about the possibility of using nukes. We will never know for sure, of course. Such discussions are held only at the highest levels behind closed-door meetings. But the fact that Putin is not using them, despite how unpredictable he may seem, suggests that such talks indeed took place. And Putin understands it as well. He knows that if he does cross the red line, he might achieve temporary victory on the battlefield, but he will lose all his meaningful international partners. They will stop pouring money into the Russian budget to support the war economy. They will never back up Putin in his future endeavors. And the worst thing for Putin, they might unite their powers with the West, with the sole purpose of stopping his insanity. Putin understands it. He hates it. I mean, the button is right there. If it's up to his will, the whole thing will take less than an hour. He hates the button. He hates that the button is so closed, but yet so unreachable. He hates it, but he has no other choice. In this sense, Ukraine has managed to break through the psychological barrier that nuclear deterrence is supposed to create. The threat of nuclear war, while ever present, is not an automatic response to conventional conflicts, especially when the aggressor is a smaller, less equipped nation like Ukraine. The current conflict is not only a test of nuclear deterrence, but also a reflection of Russia's broader strategic challenges. Kursk, for example, a historically significant region, has now become a symbol of Russia's vulnerability. Despite its proximity to the core of Russian territory, the defense of Kursk has been less robust than expected, with Ukraine taking advantage of Russia's stretched military resources. This is in part due to the fact that Russia's military is heavily reliant on contract soldiers, who need to be paid substantially more as the war drags on and losses mount. And since the use of conscripts is no longer an option, at least legally, the Kremlin is now forced to make tough decisions. How to keep its land, and most importantly, how to retain the image of Putin as a strong and decisive leader. That's why previously, as soon as there were any single hints of threat to the integrity of the Russian territory, Putin was always blackmailing the world with the use of nukes. It was scary at first. I mean, if Russia has 5,600 of them, nothing stops them from using at least one, right? That was one of the biggest consensus of the people why Putin should be respected. But this image of fear was quickly destroyed, and by nobody else other than Putin himself. By constantly threatening the world with unimaginable consequences, Putin diminished the power of his own blackmail. If you do the same threat every month, or sometimes even every single other week for more than 2 years and never actually fulfill your promises, people simply stop taking you seriously. One of the consequences of these fake threats became the increased support by the West. At first, they were afraid to use complex military machinery and equipment, such as HIMARS, and send it to Ukraine. Then they were afraid that Ukrainians might strike the wrong quote-unquote target. Then there are absolute prohibitions to use them on the territory of Russia. And what do we see now? All this fear was just inside their heads. Ukraine is allowed to do almost anything they want in order to protect their own country. And the West prefers not to intervene. By trying to look scary, Putin achieved exactly the opposite result. People are no longer afraid of him. And let's consider a hypothetical scenario under which Putin does proceed with his threats and actually uses nuclear weapons in this war. Does it even make sense? We talked about Russia's partners who will immediately abandon Putin and make him the world's biggest outcast. Russia will lose substantial amount of war money that was coming from these countries, making it increasingly impossible to continue war at current pace. So, are these new regions, Kherson, Donbass, Zaporozhye, even Crimea, worth so much to Putin to cross this final red line? Does he really care that much about Ukraine and expanding Russia? Or is he using the war as an excuse to boost his political rating inside Russia and to stay in power forever? Because, as we all know, the biggest thing that unites people is the threat by an external enemy, usually the one that they have never seen with their own eyes, but the one they know everything about because of watching TV. Even if Putin is still ready to press the button, the use of nuclear weapons releases radiation, which will make some of these territories unlivable. How will Putin explain it to his people and especially Ukrainians, who, according to him, he wants to protect so much from the evil people sitting in Kiev? And what about the Kursk region then? It is a part of a Russian territory, so Putin must care about getting it back, right? Well, using nuclear weapons in Kursk to defend Kursk is just nonsense, to say the least. Even the phrase itself does not make much sense. You don't punch yourself in the face to get rid of the headache. Thus, the failure of nuclear deterrence in Kursk is not just a failure of military strategy. It is a symptom of the larger economic and political constraints that Russia faces as it tries to navigate the complex and evolving conflict. While nuclear weapons have not yet played a direct role in this conflict, the possibility of their use is still a theoretical possibility. For now, Russia has refrained from deploying tactical nuclear weapons, even as Ukraine pushes deeper into Russian territory. But this restraint, unfortunately, is not guaranteed to last forever, especially knowing the unpredictability of Putin. There are scenarios where Russia might see the use of a limit nuclear strike as an assistance to its conventional forces if they continue to struggle defending their own territory. Another possibility is that Russia might conduct a nuclear test as a show of force, signaling to Ukraine and the rest of the world that it is willing to escalate if necessary. And such tests were happening in the past, even after the war has already started. The most recent Russian nuclear forces drill happened in May of this year. Were they able to achieve any meaningful results and scare anyone? Well, it does not look like. The drill was over very soon, and it did not receive much media coverage, even inside Russia itself. So, will Russia resort to a much more powerful nuclear test in the future to show how serious they are? There is a possibility. However, this too would risk backlash from China, India and other key partners, making it a risky strategy that could isolate Russia even further on the global stage. In the end, while nuclear weapons remain a powerful tool in Russia's arsenal, their utility in this conflict is limited. The risks of using them far outweigh the potential benefits, and as long as Ukraine avoids crossing any red lines, or even brown lines, that would threaten the core of Russian territory, such as its capital Moscow or other major cities, it seems unlikely that nuclear weapons will play a decisive role in this war, and they will remain as a tool of constantly diminishing blackmail power. Well, there you have it, guys. Enjoy your weekend. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed today's episode and you want to see more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below: PayPal donations, Patreon memberships for bonus content. You can also buy the Russian Dude merch. Thanks so much for watching. See you on Tuesday.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.